If your pothos looked amazing back in spring, and now it's yellowing, dropping leaves, or just looking tired, you're not alone, and it's probably not the plant's fault. August is genuinely one of the hardest months for pothos, because the exact conditions that keep it happy in cooler weather quietly turn into stressors once the heat and humidity shift. Here's what makes this tricky. Pothos has a reputation as the impossible-to-kill plant, so when it does start struggling, most owners don't even consider that they might be the cause. They assume it's just one of those things. But in almost every case I've looked into, it comes down to a handful of specific, fixable habits. I went through the 7 most common mistakes plant owners make with pothos specifically this time of year, plus one bonus issue almost nobody checks for. If you're making even 2 or 3 of these, that's usually enough to explain why your plant isn't thriving. Let's fix it, one at a time. The first mistake is sticking to the exact same watering schedule you used back in spring. It feels logical, you found a routine that worked, so why change it? But pothos doesn't actually care about your calendar. It cares about how quickly the soil around its roots dries out, and that rate changes dramatically with temperature and humidity. In summer heat, soil can dry out noticeably faster, which means a schedule that gave you healthy growth in April might now be leaving the plant thirsty for days before its next scheduled watering. On the flip side, if you live somewhere humid, that same schedule might now be keeping the soil wet for far longer than the roots can handle, since evaporation slows down when the air itself is already saturated with moisture. The fix is simple, but it requires breaking the schedule habit. Stick your finger about 2 inches into the soil before you water. If it's still damp at that depth, wait a day or 2 and check again. If it's dry, that's your green light. This one change, checking instead of scheduling, solves both the underwatering and overwatering versions of this mistake at the same time, because both extremes show up as yellowing leaves, just for opposite underlying reasons. A plant that's underwatered will often have leaves that feel slightly crispy or curled at the edges before they yellow, while an overwatered plant tends to have leaves that go soft and pale yellow, sometimes almost translucent, before they drop. Learning to tell these two apart from your own plant's behavior is honestly one of the most useful skills in houseplant care, because it stops you from fixing the wrong problem. The second mistake is something well-meaning plant owners do constantly in summer, moving the pothos to a brighter spot because they assume more light must mean healthier growth. It's an understandable assumption. After all, more light generally does help most plants grow more, but pothos specifically is adapted to filtered light on the forest floor, not open, direct sun. Bright, indirect light is the sweet spot. Direct afternoon sun in August, especially through an unshaded south or west-facing window, is intense enough to literally scorch the leaf tissue. What you'll see is brown, crispy, often irregularly shaped patches, usually starting at the parts of the leaf that get the most direct exposure. And here's the part that trips people up: once a leaf is scorched, it does not recover. The damage is permanent on that leaf. The only fix moving forward is preventing it on new growth. If your pothos sits near a south or west-facing window, especially one that gets unobstructed afternoon sun in summer, it needs either a sheer curtain to diffuse the light, or simply a few feet more distance from the glass. A good practical test: hold your hand where the plant sits during peak afternoon sun. If it feels genuinely hot, not just warm, that's too intense for pothos, no matter how bright and healthy that spot felt in winter when the sun's angle was completely different. The third mistake is ignoring the early signs of root rot simply because the topsoil looks fine. This is dangerous specifically because it's so easy to miss. The visible part of the plant can look completely normal for a while even as the problem develops underground. Here's why summer makes this worse. Humidity is higher, so soil physically stays damp for longer even if you're technically watering the same amount as before. Pothos roots that sit in consistently moist, poorly aerated soil become vulnerable to fungal pathogens that cause rot, and once that starts, it can spread through the root system faster than most people expect. The early warning sign usually isn't wilting. By the time a plant wilts from root rot, the damage is often already significant. The earlier, more reliable signs are a slightly mushy or soft feeling at the stem base right where it meets the soil, or a sour, swampy smell coming from the pot that wasn't there before. If you notice either of these, don't wait to see if it gets worse. The fix at this stage is usually manageable. Gently remove the plant from its pot. Trim away any dark, mushy roots with clean scissors until you're only left with firm, pale roots, and repot into fresh, well-draining soil, ideally in a pot with proper drainage, which we'll get to in a moment. Catching root rot at this early, smells a bit off stage is dramatically easier than trying to save a plant that has already collapsed and lost most of its root system. The fourth mistake is simply never pruning, which over time produces that long, sparse, leggy look, vines stretching out with big awkward gaps between leaves, instead of the full bushy shape most people picture when they think of a healthy pothos. Here's the mechanism behind it. Pothos vines, left completely alone, will keep extending in length indefinitely, because that's the plant's natural growth strategy for finding new light sources to climb toward. Left unpruned for long enough, all of the plant's energy goes into extending existing vines rather than producing new growth points, which is exactly why an unpruned pothos ends up sparse rather than full. The fix is a simple, almost satisfying one. Find a leaf node, the small bump on the stem where a leaf attaches, and make a clean cut just above it with sharp scissors or pruning snips. That cut redirects the plant's growth energy into producing new branching growth from that point, gradually filling the plant back out over the following weeks. And here's the bonus most people don't realize. Those cuttings aren't waste. Place them in a jar of water, and within a couple of weeks you'll typically see small white roots forming, at which point you can pot them up as entirely new, free plants either to fill out the same pot, gift to someone, or start expanding your own collection. The fifth mistake is over-fertilizing, usually driven by good intentions. It's growing season, so surely more feeding means more growth. Pothos does grow more actively in warm months, that part is true. But there's a complication specific to summer heat. Higher temperatures increase a plant's water usage and change how quickly fertilizer salts build up in the soil. And pothos roots are more sensitive to that salt concentration when they're already dealing with heat stress. The visible result is usually burned, crispy brown tips on otherwise healthy-looking leaves, sometimes with a slightly yellow halo around the burned section. And this can happen even when your watering routine is otherwise completely fine, which is what makes it confusing for a lot of owners who assume burned tips must mean underwatering. The fix is straightforward. Dilute your fertilizer to roughly half the strength recommended on the label, and feed somewhat less frequently during the hottest stretches of summer. You're not stopping fertilizing altogether. The plant is still actively growing and can use the nutrients. You're just protecting the roots from salt buildup while the heat is at its most intense. The sixth mistake ties back into several of the ones we've already covered. Keeping a plant in a pot with no drainage hole at all, or one that's significantly larger than the current root system actually needs. No drainage means that any excess water from a watering session has nowhere to go. It just sits at the bottom of the pot, keeping the lowest layer of soil constantly saturated, which is exactly the condition that encourages root rot. A pot that's oversized creates a related but slightly different problem. It holds far more soil volume than the roots can actually draw moisture from, so that extra soil stays wet for much longer than the plant can use it, again keeping roots sitting in damp conditions longer than is healthy. If your current pot doesn't have drainage, you have two realistic options. Carefully add a few drainage holes if the material allows it, or transfer to a pot that's properly sized and drained, ideally with a matching saucer to catch runoff. This single fix makes almost every other mistake on this list easier to avoid, because proper drainage removes the constant background risk of excess moisture sitting around the roots. And the number one mistake, the one that surprises the most people, running air conditioning constantly through summer without accounting for what it does to humidity. AC keeps a room comfortably cool, but it also actively strips moisture out of the air as part of how it works. Pothos is generally considered a fairly humidity-tolerant houseplant compared to more finicky tropicals, but tolerant isn't the same as unaffected. In a consistently dry, cold, air-conditioned room, you'll often see crispy brown edges along otherwise healthy leaves, slower overall growth, and a general look of the plant just seeming tired or dull, even when watering and light are both correct. The fix doesn't need to be complicated or expensive. A simple pebble tray, A shallow dish filled with pebbles and a little water, with the pot sitting on top of the pebbles rather than in the water directly, raises the humidity immediately around the plant as the water evaporates. Grouping several plants close together also helps, since plants naturally raise local humidity around each other through transpiration. Neither of these requires buying a humidifier, though that's obviously an option too if you want more precise control. Before the checklist, one bonus thing worth mentioning, because it often gets blamed on everything except the actual cause, pests. Stressed plants, and by this point in the video, you can probably guess that a plant dealing with any of the 7 issues above is a stressed plant, becomes significantly more vulnerable to common pests like spider mites and mealybugs. The catch is that early infestations are easy to miss, because the visible symptoms, yellowing, stunted new growth, a generally unhappy appearance, look almost identical to the other mistakes we've already covered. The quickest check: look closely at the undersides of leaves and along the stems for tiny webbing, small cottony white clusters, or tiny moving specks. If you spot any of these, address the pest issue directly, usually with insecticidal soap or a diluted neem oil solution, in addition to fixing whichever of the 7 mistakes contributed to the plant's stress in the first place. Fixing the environment without addressing an active pest problem, or vice versa, tends to leave the plant stuck in a slow decline instead of actually recovering. So here's your complete quick reference checklist for keeping pothos healthy through August. Check soil moisture with your finger before watering, rather than following a fixed schedule. Keep the plant in bright, indirect light, well away from direct afternoon sun. Watch the stem base for any mushy texture or sour smell as an early root rot warning. Prune regularly to keep growth full rather than leggy, and propagate the cuttings instead of tossing them. Dilute fertilizer during the hottest weeks. Make sure the pot actually drains, and isn't oversized for the current root mass. Counter air conditioning dryness with a pebble tray or plant grouping. And do a quick pest check on the undersides of leaves every so often, especially if the plant already seems a little off. None of these fixes are complicated on their own, most take 5 minutes once you actually know what to look for. The hard part was never the fix, it was figuring out which of these 7 or 8 things was actually the cause. Hopefully this saved you some of that guesswork. If this helped you figure out what's been stressing your pothos, hit subscribe. I put out plant care content like this every week, working through one plant and one seasonal issue at a time. I'll see you in the next one.